Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/WTech. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player.
Moving the needle. Welcome to the Washington Policy Podcast.
Curating communications, media, and tech policy news so you don't have to. News, interviews, everything you need without the axe to grind. It's the Washington Tech Policy Podcast with Joe Miller.
The Federal Trade Commission issues new guidelines for native ads. Treasury Inspector General says the IRS's website isn't secure, and Alex Kreilein is here. The Federal Trade Commission has issued new guidelines pertaining to the use of so-called native ads. Native ads are the types of ads that appear to be content but are really advertisements, like some of the quote-unquote articles you see on BuzzFeed beneath or between the real articles. 10 Secrets for a Better Body in 2016, for example, could be a headline, but then when you click on the content, the whole thing is really an ad. In any case, the FTC's new guidelines say disclosures may be necessary to ensure consumers know the articles are really advertisements. They also have guidelines around how those disclosures should be made, clearer and unambiguous, as close in proximity to native ads as possible, in front of a color that is easy to read, and that the ads should be visible against the background of the disclosure. The guidelines also say that terms like promoted, even though the native ads were paid for, can be misleading. But of course, the guidelines didn't come without pushback from the advertising sector. One of the issues that have been raised is whether the guidelines reduce the credibility of the ads. The Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration, TGITA, is concerned the IRS isn't secure enough. It's primarily concerned with how the IRS authenticates users coming to its site. Inspector General J. Russell George wrote, quote, "The unauthorized disclosure of tax information can enable identity thieves to prepare identity theft tax returns that more accurately reflect a valid return, increasing the risk that fraudulent returns will not be detected by the IRS," end quote. The IRS has agreed to implement recommendations to tighten up security, according to the TIGTA report. The FBI is looking into another potential hack by a foreign government. This time the breach involves Juniper Networks, but no one seems to be clear on the extent of the breach. All they know is that someone found a backdoor into Juniper, which exposes potentially classified U.S. government information. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals will not consider a case in which the lower court upheld the National Security Agency's Internet surveillance program. Judge M. Margaret McCune issued an order saying the issue of the surveillance program's constitutionality cannot be taken up in, quote, piecemeal fashion, end quote, and that there would need to be a final decision on all of the 17 claims before the court would consider the constitutionality of the NSA's surveillance program. Finally, Lifeline subscriptions have declined, according to the Universal Service Fund monitoring report. Lifeline is the FCC program that subsidizes phone service for low-income households. The program is down about 1.1 million people since 2013 and almost 4 million from the year before. The FCC has been looking into modernizing the program to subsidize broadband. For more on USF reform, you can check out my interview with Michael Scarrato of the National Hispanic Media Coalition in episode 12. Stay with us. For you, my dear listeners of the Washington Tech Policy Podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. You'll be amazed at how much time Audible will save you. Why not listen at the gym, in the car, or on the metro once it's packed again next week? How about Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman? You can download Thinking Fast and Slow or another audiobook free by trying audible.com. Sign up for your free audiobook and 30-day trial today at audibletrial.com/WTech. My guest today is Alex Kreilein, Managing Partner of SecureSet and over the Cybersecurity Accelerator. He engages corporate C-suite officers, tech luminaries, security researchers, hackers, and academics to develop and implement strategies kickstarting cybersecurity startups. He co-manages a fund associated with the Accelerator to bring enormous value to early-stage startups through a focused product development, customer acquisition, and investor engagement strategy. Previously, Alex was a strategist at the Department of Homeland Security and was detailed as a guest researcher to the National Institute of Standards and Technology. His work advanced goals in cybersecurity, national security and emergency communications, spectrum management, risk analysis, mobile applications, research and development, and oversight of multi-billion-dollar grant programs. Prior to DHS, Alex served as the managing director of the University of Colorado Boulder Venture Fund, as well as legislative assistant for Congresswoman Jane Harman on technology policy and innovation issues. He has worked as a consultant for major systems integrators in the defense, intelligence, and technology sectors. Alex is a graduate of the U.S. Naval War College with a master's in national security and strategic studies. He's also a graduate of Fordham University and attended the University of International Business and Economics in Beijing. He currently attends the University of Colorado at Boulder's Interdisciplinary Telecommunications Program and is a PhD candidate. Please welcome Alex Kreilein. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So tell us a little bit more about SecureSet and the market you serve.
Yeah, so our company is focused on kind of one fundamental issue, which is we really want to help people with a desire to gain access to the field of cybersecurity do that in a really accelerated fashion. And there's two customers that we serve with that methodology. The first ones are actually students, where we take them on to do training and education over the course of a 5-month, very intensive program that's focused around that operational knowledge segment that people really need. Not so much theory or, how to put a great PowerPoint deck together to talk about it, but actually how to, resist active hacking, how to learn how to hack, how to learn how to defend networks and systems effectively. And then separately, we do a lot of work with startups where we run a investment fund that'll be kicking off in a few months. And that fund is targeted specifically at making investments in early stage cybersecurity companies. So our ability to really understand from an academic and intellectual perspective what needs to happen in the cybersecurity marketplace for networks to be defended more effectively and eloquently, and then separately for us to be able to work with those newcoming startups to help them turn on products and practices that make it more effective for them to sell into a marketplace. That's really what our focus is. We love really smart people. We love this market. And by kind of doing those two things, we can do both of them much more effectively than if we just chose one.
So why cybersecurity, Alex? What lit the spark for you?
Yeah, I have a background in telecommunications, which a lot of people oftentimes associate with cybersecurity, but oftentimes the communications networks themselves don't. And this became somewhat frustrating for me because I realized that, communications networks and systems that can't really be trusted can't really be used. So just kind of positing a hypothetical. If you wanted to enable, the distribution of medical health records, you would want to be able to do that and, ensure compliance with HIPAA, but then also, and more importantly, just ensure best practices to defend your customers' highly valuable and private data. And that's really what cybersecurity is about. So for me, it was a transition of thinking about how do we have communications networks to how do we have trusted communications networks? How do we enable trust on the network itself, on the applications that are developed, on the phones that attach to the network, and on the people who run those networks for us? Those are really important big ticket questions, and they require real technical expertise to address.
So obviously we have a lot of problems when it comes to cybersecurity, whether it comes to individuals, corporations, and even the federal government, which is supposed to be protecting the nation's infrastructure. We had the famous Target example on the one hand, but millions of federal employees' data were also hacked into at OPM. Now we have hackers targeting vehicles like Andy Greenberg wrote about in Wired earlier this year, where his Jeep Grand Cherokee was attacked while he was driving, hackers draining Starbucks cards. Who can we trust when it comes to cybersecurity?
Yeah, I mean, the classic rule is trust but verify, right? So, I mean, the answer is like you really shouldn't trust anyone inherently in a kind of networked world. What you should do is you should verify that trust. And so, I mean, there are a lot of firms that will market aggressively around this idea of advanced persistent threats, which is basically a nation state actor, like a government actor you could think of, somebody who's incredibly highly motivated. They're very well financed. They're very well skilled. And they're incredibly persistent. Those are hard to resist, and they're incredibly hard to mitigate against. But people oftentimes forget that most attacks actually happen from insiders. These are people who you inherently trusted in some way, shape, or form. They worked at your organization. You gave them credentials. You gave them access controls. And what they did was they overcame the assigned access controls that you gave them, and they were able to exfiltrate data or cause some sort of network damage, like a denial of service attack. So, trusting people is, I think fine for the movies. Trusting people in a world of communications networks is an awful idea. We verify trust. That's the way that's supposed to work.
So what about the fundamentals of cybersecurity? Are people have the right tools? Do they understand how they should update their passwords and take care of their passwords? Are we doing the right things in terms of teaching the public about the fundamentals of how to keep their networks and their workstations safe?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think that we are. To be honest, most of the world of cybersecurity has become about selling products. And I mean, there are some really basic things that we should do instead of making people feel like they can secure their network with a product. We have to educate them about how to secure their networks in the first place. So let me give you an example. There's, statistics will vary depending on which source that you read, but, generally speaking, it's accepted that somewhere in the area of 20% of all hacks happen because someone was able to overcome a password. So if you think about what a password is, it's just language, right? And you can do analysis on language in all sorts of ways and forms. The field of language security is called LangSec. It's a really interesting one, and it goes into thinking about how people construct strings or arguments in computer programming and code, but it also extends into passwords. And so every year at, DEF CON or Black Hat or Intercept or B-Sides, any one of these large security conferences, they'll always have people who will literally be able to guess your password. With enough time and effort, you can do that. And the way that you do that is by basically analyzing what the requirements of that password are, which are usually clearly stated. It says it has to have a special symbol. It has to be between 8 and 32 characters in length. You can't use full words. All these things are information that hackers are then able to use to construct computer programming capabilities that basically run what's called a dictionary attack. And they run a customized dictionary against your passwords. And then they're able to overcome your passwords. And once they can, the network has a very difficult way, or has a very difficult time, rather, of telling between a true person and somebody who just, was authenticated to the network. And so from a perspective of, how we manage that, our methodology has just been, well, we should just make passwords longer, which is helpful, but only marginally so. This is why our company's focused more on things like training and education than just, doubling down on new products, right? So we have to ask this question of, on a national policy perspective. So we want to have, hundreds of thousands of people who work in cybersecurity, right? And the way that we do that today is we train people who work in security to have expertise. But this is a problem that we're only addressing at the margins, right? We're taking people who are already in the industry and we're providing them with very expensive, very difficult training. But we don't actually do almost anything to get people interested in the industry in the first place. So we have two problems, right? We've got the first problem of we don't have enough really smart people at the top. And that's what our methodology today addresses. But the more important problem that we aren't addressing as a nation is how do we get more people into the field? This is a problem of attrition. It's not necessarily just a problem of adding a product on top. We still need tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of threat and intelligence analysts in addition to people who just manage and own products. So if we kind of extend that through a little bit, we've done a marginally good job at making STEM careers really cool, but we haven't really focused around associating cybersecurity with that. And when we look at the number of jobs that are open in cybersecurity, and you'll see statistics between 900,000 to like 1.5 million jobs that are open in cybersecurity. Just training and educating people who already work in the field doesn't bring new talent into it. And so that's really what SecureSet's focus is on our 5-month academy program, is bringing new people into the field to try and address that gap.
And for folks who may just be out of school or mid-career who didn't necessarily major in computer science, maybe they majored in something else and they're realizing it was a bad choice, are there different certifications they can pursue that don't necessarily require on-the-job training right away?
Totally.
What are some interventions for people who maybe picked the wrong major, I guess, is kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Actually, the way you frame the question is the way a lot of people think about it. But I would posit that there are a lot of other fields besides just computer science that are valuable to cybersecurity. So as an example, like I love people who have a background in psychology. We can train them on a tool like Python programming, as an example, or shell scripting. That's something that can be learned because it's a function. Right? But what we really want to focus on is making sure we have a full set of talent. So like people in the arts and humanities who have backgrounds in those fields are oftentimes incredibly good at cybersecurity because they understand how attackers think, and then they can manage the process of mitigation. But strictly speaking, from people who want to get into the technical side of it, I mean, there are a couple of great things that you can do. I mean, one of the first ones is just learn some basic networking or computer programming. Just enable yourself with fundamentals, right? So there's really three things that cybersecurity rests on. There's networks, computer networks, there's systems, and then there's computer programming, right? So learning how computer networks work by taking like a CCNA, which is a Cisco Certified Networking Associate, or like a Cisco Certified Networking Professional, which is much harder to do. Those are great ways to understand the fundamentals of networking. But you can even go and get access to a lot of this information completely for free, just on the internet, of like figuring out how does internet working work? What's the difference between a layer 2 switch and a layer 3 router? How do protocols work? What are their vulnerabilities? And then in systems, like enabling yourself to understand like how your computer actually works, right? So like, people have gotten really comfortable on GUIs or graphical user interfaces, but they oftentimes don't even know what a terminal is, or how it works, or what Linux is, or what Unix is. And these are the language that our machines speak off of. And you'd be surprised at how powerful you can make your machine and how efficient you can become if you invest maybe 5 or 7 hours in just taking, an online course, like some massive online course on Linux. And in programming, there's hundreds of companies that help people understand basic programming. There's Code Academy, there's Learning Tree, there's, a ton of others. And they do incredibly good work. So you can actually help yourself understand cybersecurity very well by taking some of this on your own. And then there are special programs like SecureSet who are really focused around helping you apply that knowledge and work in the field. And so, there's a lot of ways that you can go about it. There's other companies besides ours as well, not people who do exactly what we do, but people who can also help you, get some good operational knowledge.
And so there's tuition, I guess, involved for folks who are interested in participating in your program.
Yeah, definitely. We're basically taking what you would learn over the course of 4 or 5 years, and we're putting into about a 5-month program. And the rationale behind that is you'll really accelerate your career when you do that. And we also include certifications to make sure that people have an opportunity to demonstrate their market capability, right? Which is really what a certification is. And then separately from that, we offer a money-back guarantee, or what we call a career promise. So if you do not get a job offer to work in this field within a period of time, we are obligated to refund your money. And those are things that you have to qualify for. So like you have to, pass a suitability check just like you would in an employer. And we kind of put a couple of barriers in front of people, just like an employer would, so that we can make sure that they actually can get a job on the other end. But we stand behind our product, and other people should as well.
That's fantastic. So all you art majors, all you psychology majors, sounds like SecureSet is going to be the move for you.
It's not a bad idea. But, we also should do more, too, on kind of a national level around not just training and education, but also like the distribution and sharing of information, especially to like small and medium-sized businesses. And these are things that our company doesn't do, but they're national policy objectives that we really need to move Congress and move the executive branch towards, to make sure that like a medium-sized company has an ability to understand, cybersecurity information sharing. They hold most of the information for most of the people who live in the world. And this focus around just these kind of 16 critical infrastructure and key resource sectors actually harms, in my opinion, the ability for small to medium-sized businesses to really take on important goals of making sure that they meet these infrastructure requirements. So there's a lot of policy involved as well.
So, Alex, it's been an honor having you on, and thanks so much for your time. I just have a few more questions, and then we'll close. Sound good?
Sure.
Obviously, you've had a breadth of experience on the government side, on the academic side, now on the entrepreneurial side. That's a lot of skills. What are some of your productivity hacks when it comes to staying on top of your game? It can be an app, it can be computer software, it can be even just a habit. What are some things you do to really stay on top of your game?
Yeah, so I try and actually start every day particularly early. So I get up earlier than most people. Some of this is just more time in the day, right? And when I get up, I respond to a ton of emails. I send a ton of emails, and I block schedule my day. So like if you're going to send me an email at 10 a.m., I will not respond until I have a block of time that I respond to emails at about like 11. And I do this because I want to make sure that I have the most amount of time that I can spend working, researching, and managing my team and my projects. But I do almost all of my communications electronically. I try not to take meetings because I think that they're generally a waste of time. And I've gotten myself into a habit of really trying to do analysis. So if somebody wants to take a meeting with me, instead what I'll ask them to do is send me an email or send me a white paper, send me something that I can read. I use some language tools on my computer to read things back to me at a really rapid rate so I can read along with it and hear it and understand it. And that's how I'm able to kind of drill through a ton of information. I also use a lot of like Gmail plugin tools. So one of my favorites is Streak, and this is just a CRM tool and allows me to track, tap, and articulate where they are in my pipeline. So like, did I get back to Joe? Joe sent me an email. It's about this thing. It goes under media and communications. Have I responded to him? Yes or no? Where am I in that pipeline of completing that task? And so, that's a really, I think, excellent tool. But then, some of the others that I just think are really important for people to learn is like, what's an appropriate way to just do like good analysis, right? Like I try and get my hands on every white paper, every PowerPoint deck I can possibly find. And then I just use some basic tools on my laptop to search it for keywords and information. And that's how like I'm able to understand market trends really effectively. And so, managing your time is really about managing the way you process information. And so like there isn't really a good, set of life hacks besides time management. And, think about where you spend a lot of your time where you're not getting return on investment. I would posit most of that is in meetings, which is why, I resist taking them at all cost. My time's better spent actually, implementing things or understanding things and getting really smart than just sitting around a table and drinking coffee with someone who I only tangentially like.
Wow, so systems are everything, I guess.
Systems are everything.
Down to. Yeah. So now, Alex, what is one book that you've read recently that you feel compelled to recommend to everyone you meet?
I would absolutely recommend The Starfish and the Spider. So the Starfish and the Spider is a really good book by Rod Beckstrom, and he was the former CEO of ICANN. And The Starfish and the Spider is about basically distributed and decentralized information networks. And it sounds, really wonky and mathy, and parts of it can be, which is what I actually like. I think people should push themselves to understand those things. But really what it's functionally about is how do organizations manage themselves? And so there's this whole prologue to the book that starts off with, understanding like the Incans and the Toltecs, right? And these like Native American, or rather, native tribes in Central and South America, and Spanish conquistadors who would roll in and would be involved in the execution of their leader, and then their civilization would crumble, right? As opposed to some of the Native American tribes in what is now current day United States, they didn't really have centralized control or centralized leadership, which actually let them adapt very quickly. If someone very senior in their tribe was killed or executed or died, they were very adaptable. And he extends this into analysis of when like the Recording Industry Association of America sued Napster, right? That Napster gets taken down, and then 4 more other companies show up in its spot, Kazaa and a bunch of others. And he goes through this history and analysis, and then applies it to organizations like Anonymous. ISIS wasn't around when he wrote the book, so much so. But it's really about headless organizations and how do they exist, and what are some right and wrong ways to engage them.
You've been listening to Alex Kreilein, Managing Partner of SecureSet. Alex, thanks so much for joining me. Are there any final words you'd like to leave with the audience?
Yes, beware of crypto policy. It's a new really hot topic in the information security and privacy space. And I'm very wary about those ongoings. So people should keep an eye on the ball there, and people should try and experiment harder with communication systems and learn some things about how the internet and other systems work. It's really rewarding.
And where can folks find you online?
Yeah, secureset.com, SECURESET.com.
And Twitter?
At SecureSetHQ.
Sounds good. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Joe.
That concludes episode 19 of the podcast. Thanks so much to all of you for listening. I cannot do any of this without you, so thank you. If you're new to the podcast, or even if you've been listening for a while, I have a free cheat sheet for all of my new email subscribers, and you can find the sign up for that at washingtech.com/cheat sheet. And that cheat sheet is a guide for you to get up to speed on various different policy areas, including cybersecurity, intellectual property, net neutrality, and other areas. It's a quick reference anytime you're preparing for a meeting or writing something you need citations for. That's washingtech.com/cheat sheet. Thanks again to all of you for listening. I will see you back here next week. Happy New Year.
Thanks for listening to the Washing Tech Policy Podcast. You've been briefed.